the Times kind of uh, admits to picking their own what they think defines a bestseller, and they'll have like people will stack the deck too. So if there's like a little dagger next to it,
Right.
that's when they think that maybe someone is like jiggered with the numbers, because people will go out and buy like 10,000
You mean
copies of
like
one
Don
book.
Jr. does?
Yes, like Don
Yeah,
Jr.
yeah. It's really common. It's really
Yeah.
common. It's common with fiction. It's common with like all these different.
He's
a
now
lot of
promoting. He's now promoting himself as a New York Times #1 best-selling author.
I mean, when I think literary greatness, I think Don Jr.
I know.
Don Jr.
It's hard to imagine.
He's supplanted Sarah Palin as my favorite writer.
Oh,
I think.
I bet she had more people actually buying her book though.
She probably did, but I
She
still
was a
remember
genuine
like
phenomenon.
2 weeks after she was like done on the New York Times bestseller list, I was at an airport and I saw her book on a remaindered pile at the air for like $1. So you never know. I almost bought it, but
It's an airport buy, sure.
yeah. I kind of regret that I didn't. I did buy my dad. We'll get into movies in a minute. It's so funny. I'm still on these mailing lists. I bought my dad. Do you remember Sarah Palin had a T-shirt that was a kind of pastiche of the old Rosie the Riveter thing with the.
Yes, I do remember that. Yeah.
And I can't remember what the slogan was, but it was hilariously stupid. And I
It
bought
was probably
one.
You Betcha.
Yeah, I think it was. And I bought one.
That was
for
her
my
thing.
dad. They had one of my dad's size. He's 6'5", and somehow I bought him a Sarah Palin T-shirt, and I got on a mailing list, and I refused to take myself off it because somewhere somebody is looking at my email and they're very confused by the fact that I'm still.
Oh yeah, I check the spam folder. I check all of the stuff that gets sorted because I'm constantly amazed at who the internet thinks I am.
Yeah, yeah. And there's people out there spending money trying to figure out what you're going to do based on what list you're on. So I think it's.
I know, and this is why I actually don't worry too much about data collection in terms of like what nefarious thing that marketers are doing, because it's like they have all this information and they cannot draw a bead on anything about me.
Yeah.
So how good could it really be?
But I also, may be a special case.
I think I think it's on every American to be on as many disparate email lists as possible and just shunt them all to spam.
Yeah, fuck with the algorithms.
Exactly. Confuse them. This is The Movies That Made Me with your hosts, Josh Olson
and Joe Dante.
We're very psyched. We're here with one of our friends from Chapo Trap House, Amber Frost. But anyway, Amber, you've got you told me this a while back, and I've been dying to do this. Not just because I wanted to get you on the show, but I love your topic. Do you want to tell?
Right.
I don't think we even got to telling Joe last time. So
I don't think so. So my favorite kind of movie is, or favorite, whatever that means. But a genre that like shows up a lot in my most formative movies are protagonists or major characters that are failures and frauds. They have to be both. So they have to be like a failure. So in some way they have to be like a loser. And I've got here, maybe they've ruined their own life. Maybe they lack ambition. Maybe they're just like in a rut. Maybe they never caught a break. Maybe they're spinning their wheels, or circumstances or sudden disaster has left them desperate, but their chips have to be down at the beginning. They don't have to end that way, but they have to start out like chips down. And then the fraud part, okay, so it's not just like any old crook. Like they have to attempt to transcend their failure, or at least keep their head above water in some way, through dishonesty or some kind of surreptitiousness. So that can be a big coordinated plan, or it could just be like sleazy little things that they do from day to day to keep from like totally collapsing. So like scams, schemes, grift, hustle, con, that kind of thing.
So they can't start out on top and sink to the
Right.
bottom. Oh, that's
Right.
okay. So no
Um,
Nightmare Alley.
right. So like, and then just also like, I don't know, like The Third Man's one of my favorite movies, and like Harry Lime is sleazy and surreptitious, but his grift is very successful up until the untimely end. And then
But it's a
like
bad grift. I mean, he's
yeah.
killing children. I mean,
Oh
he's a
no.
bad guy.
That's the thing, is that there's a moral hierarchy of grifts, and some of them are terrible, and some of them are like, that's kind of justifiable. Um, or and like I don't include heist movies.
Okay.
Because
Even
what
even shabby heists.
they might include like a hustle or a con, but a heist is like a grand choreographed like ensemble,
Like the Hot Rock.
thing. Right. So it's like it's I love the mechanical beauty of a good heist movie, but it's not a heist is not a story of frauds. And when it goes wrong, it's not a failure, it's a disaster.
Right.
So different genre. Has to be kind of single person focused, or at least a couple people. Can't be like a big, we're getting the team together. Totally messes with the genre. So there's a few subcategories in here, and I'll just like go by that I've noticed.
But
One
no,
is
I do
obvious-
want to ask before we get into this: is this criteria that you've developed over the years, or is this something that you sort of started thinking about in regards to doing the show?
over the years.
I love the idea that really okay.
Over the years, this is a spiel that I have perfected in many bars, screaming after many drinks, sort of developing the thesis.
Fantastic.
And observing my patterns, looking for the kind of outliers, and exploring my failures and fraud genre.
Fantastic.
They're just the movies that I tend to gravitate towards. So there's a lot of showbiz failures and frauds movies, and not just because movie people like making movies about making movies, but I think like my big one is probably All About Eve.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, you've got like Anne Baxter just milking the ingenue thing to death. Like so much so that like everyone believes her, even Margot, even the gimlet-eyed Betty Davis character who's supposed to see through it all, and they're all like, oh, got everything but the bloodhounds nipping at her heels, and it's just great because it takes you a while to sort of figure out how nefarious she is. And the fact that she's just some like podunk farm girl who's like, I'm going to get out of this one horse town and I'm going to run this con. And she's just so evil. And everyone buys it. It's also got like just great dialogue, and great, that snappy kind of era of dialogue. It has like, it's not the first, but it's like maybe the second or third Marilyn Monroe. She has this little role as like an aspiring starlet, and she's so funny. And I know that's like it's a very like, oh, my favorite season is autumn, or like, Die Hard's a Christmas movie kind of observation. But she really had such comedic chops, and the whole like sense of herself as a comedy bimbo. She's like just a very good like detail, and oh, why do they all look like scared rabbits, like to throw her in there for that before she was really anything. And everyone has good lines, and that's also how you sort of figure out that Anne Baxter is evil, because she has no sense of humor. She's like the only one in the whole movie that doesn't have like a quip, or like she has no banter or bon mots or whatever. She's doing this, all I believe in is the theater. And you're like, oh, bullshit. And you just hate her so much by the end. She's not a sympathetic con woman at all, but it's fantastic. And it's one of my favorite it's really kind of, and I don't mean this, in a preachy way, but it's kind of feminist too, because the women figure out that this woman is like a grifter, and she's got, they're like, something's not right about her story. There's something bullshit about this. And then they figure out when she goes after like Betty Davis's man. Finally, the men sort of figure it out. But first, it's just the women are like, I don't trust her. And all the men are like, oh, those girls, they're all so competitive. They couldn't possibly, have any real objection to one another. This is all just petty girl stuff. And it's like, no, she's evil. Anne Baxter is so evil. She's so
but
good
you know,
at it.
the Celeste Holm character buys into it for longer than
She does, but she's
anybody
the
else.
goody two shoes. And when she finally gets it, she's like, oh shit. Especially because she's supposed to be Margot's like, you know, biggest advocate. So it's sort of tragic, but it ends great. And then you've got like, I mean, it's cliched like Sunset Boulevard, so I'm not gonna even put that one. But The Producers, another great Hollywood, and that one's got it flips it because these people are failures at being failures.
Yes.
Yeah, which is great, and it's got like it's like the best kind of Gene Wilder role where he's like this very like suppressed, quiet, genteel person who is like bubbling with rage and anxiety and explodes off and on. It's got
Zero Mostel's so sweaty in that movie. I always think of just the way his hair is, his comb over is plastered to his balding head, and
it's Zero Mostel in this
smell him.
Also, interesting thing about him, he was brought up very early, like pre HUAC, to like name names because he drew like cartoons for like the Daily Worker, like little funny comedy cartoons, and he was blacklisted like before the blacklist. So it was sort of, I think it was actually like Elia Kazan who like put him in his first like movie afterwards.
In Panic in the Streets.
Which must have been.
Oh, that's
like,
right. Yeah,
he was a real gentleman about it too. They were like, "Do you have any problems working with Elia Kazan?" And he's like, "No, I don't blacklist people." Just like very, very gentlemanly way of putting it. But it's so fucking funny, and it's my favorite kind of like Mel Brooks thing where he gets to do the whole sing and dance thing. It's just the great use of Gene Wilder where he's just freaking out and then like repressed. I think it might have been Mel Brooks when they asked him like, oh, so what's like Gene Wilder like to work with? And he's like, he said something like, I'm paraphrasing, like he's a darling man. He's the angriest man I've ever met in my life. So I think all that like repressed like thing is sort of real for him. And it's just funny. And then there's, you know, there's other stuff pre that, like The Music Man. I was obsessed with The Music Man, which when you look back, almost no one can sing in that movie. As far as golden era like musicals go, it's like a lot of this is just talking. But it's a good grift because in the end, like the grift works and like it's like he's redeemed or something like that. So there's a ton of that.
Well, that is one of the I'm not a big, we talk about the show, like musicals is not my genre, but there are a few that I make.
Well,
I know, yes.
Correct that.
Note to our listener, she's rolling her eyes. And Joe is just shaking his head. But yeah, The Music Man is one I love. It's My Fair Lady. There's a couple of others.
About like Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. What about boys usually like that one because it's really athletic.
I've never seen it.
I never much liked that one.
Oh
But
my God,
Bandwagon,
really?
now that's a movie.
Bandwagon's pretty. I got turned on to Ileana Douglas turned me onto the Bandwagon on this show, and I quite enjoyed it. I have to say.
I think it's like it's about what you go into it for with musicals. Like for me, it's like, I mean, first of all, like a lot of the golden era stuff was just like really beautifully made. Even the dumb stuff that all had the same like plot, where it was just like, you know, I know we'll put on a show. Like, you know, like that's the same thing. Everything they're going to save the orphanage or whatever by putting on the show, but they're great. They're really digestible. But if you go into it for like songs, they're ones that you prefer. If you want like an actual well-written movie, there's other ones. If you like choreography, go for like Seven Brides or Seven Brothers. But whatever. If you're not into any of those things, I can see how musicals might not be for you.
Well, when I was a kid, I was always annoyed that they stopped the story to sing. And you know, that was the big problem with The Wizard of Oz, which I saw in a theater at a kiddie matinee when I was a kid. And it was a wonderful movie, but they kept stopping and singing. And I couldn't figure out why. Now, later, obviously, I've come to realize what the genre means and how it's supposed to work. But at the time, it was like love scenes. It's like, what's that doing there? Why aren't they hitting somebody?
I like the idea that in a movie as surreal as The Wizard of Oz, you're really taking me out of it with this singing and dancing. I was looking at the flying monkeys and I was trying to pay attention to that, but suddenly they're singing. I mean, like, totally threw me off.
How do they know the words?
Yeah.
I think the ones may have come from, because early on, I was a huge Marx Brothers fan, and there are those
Well,
relatively
that's a
early
that's a
ones.
that's a terrible example.
Yeah, when
because
they have that
that really
sappy
does
couple.
stop the story.
There's always that sappy couple who, I don't give a shit. Push them off the boat for
That's
God's
Thalberg.
sake.
That's
Yeah.
Sure, for that
he
they should
wanted
just.
to make them into a big, mainstream hits because
And
their
they were,
Paramount pictures weren't that successful.
but okay. But I mean, they were in spite of those scenes, not because of them.
But they didn't make as much money and they didn't play as many places. And you got the MGM gloss,
But I
and
mean,
the
has
MGM
anybody
theaters.
of those later films, has anybody ever said like, "Oh, now they've got it right"? Now they're, I mean,
Only with the Night at the Opera. But
really,
that's the only one where I don't.
Which
really
one?
the couple.
Which one did Groucho sing Lydia the Tattooed Lady in?
Does he? I don't think he does that in a movie, does he?
I think
he
that's
did.
really early. I think that's
Yeah.
one of the.
I think that's when they were just like, let's do a stage show and it'll be a movie. And it took for a while where they're like, okay, we need a
Well, it was
dowager
Coconuts
camp.
and
Yeah.
Animal Crackers. Those were all
Yeah.
stage shows, and they were photographed pretty much like stage shows.
Right.
I was at a wedding many years ago, and there was a young woman sitting across the table from us, and she was a friend of her name. I found out her name was Lydia, and I started singing Lydia, oh Lydia, and it just annoyed the shit out of her.
It's
Well,
a great
the
song.
rhyme is so great though.
It is
Lydia,
Lydia.
the encyclopedia.
Yeah.
Yes.
What else rhymes with Lydia?
Lydia, the tattooed lady.
Really good, and it's a little bit
She was
dirty.
she was like, "You think I haven't heard that before?" I was like, "I don't know. You're like 30. How do I know?"
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like I don't think a lot of 30-year-olds know that song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess if you're named Lydia, I probably know Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho better than most people.
There's no
I
good
understand.
songs with Amber in it. So yeah. Oh, by the way, I had a note here that it's like, I guess a lot of these movies are pretty old, but they were formative for me very early on because I only had one. Like wherever I lived, it tended to be small towns. We moved around a lot, but there was like one like family video place, and we basically ran out of movies there. So we ended up going to the library to like get VHS tapes, which the library, of course, has
Classics.
like really old movies.
Right.
And because of that too, I would have to also pick stuff out based on a card catalog description because there's no picture or poster or anything. So this entire relationship that people have with like that rental era, the people my age, I don't have, which I realized.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think my friend Matt was talking about, he's like, I saw so many movies that I never would have watched on purpose that I'm so glad I did just because they had cool cover art.
Yeah. And there's a great book of like cheesy VHS covers. I can't remember the title of it, but yeah, it's so much. It is sort of instant Proustian flashback when I go to it and half the movies I'd never seen but always wanted to. And
right, even though like especially by that time there was, I mean, they're just like trying to make the best poster or the best cover possible that may have absolutely nothing to do with the movie.
Yeah.
Which is my favorite. It's my favorite thing where they're like, look, we got a star that's in this movie for 8 minutes and we're gonna, just play a little fast and loose with what might be a good image representation of the content of this movie.
Joe's worked with a guy who was pretty good at that.
You talking about Mr. Corman?
Mr. Corman was the king of.
Well, he came up in an era where the poster was what was designed first, because that was what was going to get people into the theater, and then the company would go out and they'd show the poster to people and get reactions, and then they decide whether to make the movie or not.
I think it's awesome.
Well, speaking of algorithms, now that Netflix is the big thing, they don't use any of the movie posters. They'll take like a still and it's shaped differently. And I learned that they show like according to your tastes, they pick different images of the movie. So they're like, okay, well, you watched, Clueless and Romy and Michelle's high school reunion. So if I'm going to try and get you to watch Little Women, the image they're going to use for that is going to be a bunch of girls giggling together. But if you watch, a bunch of like period dramas, I'm going to show, whatever, like a bunch of women in period costume over
carriage.
Beth dying or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's
I didn't
very
realize
clever.
that with the art as well, or like the stills. That's crazy.
That's
The
a
stills,
lot of
yeah.
trouble to go to. But what do you expect from a company that dubs everything in Serbo-Croatian? I mean, they've got so many units and so many.
They don't do
people
it
working for
personally,
them.
Joe.
I mean, literally, in Hollywood, almost every other building now says Netflix on it.
Yeah, it's
They
insane.
have taken over everything.
Yeah.
I just think it's baffling that no one, like, that their books are so closed. There was like no one knows like who's watching what. It's super weird how secretive they're allowed to be. And I don't know. I want to know. I want to sneak in and take a look at those books. But apparently, you like have to sign like a super intense NDA to work there, where you don't say anything about anything.
Well, they do every now and then.
Oh,
go ahead. Sorry.
There was some SNL sketch that was actually sort of funny, where they were like, Netflix's business model is making a show that only one person watches for every single person with a Netflix account. It can't possibly be turning a profit.
And they've got so much money.
I don't get it. And then every now and then they'll tell you something. I guess I just read the the new Zack Snyder film is like one of their top 10 most watched movie. They've announced that. They won't tell you how many people or what that means, or
people with 4 hours to spare. There's so many.
No, the zombie one.
The new one.
That's
Army
4 hours.
No, that one's 2.5 hours.
Oh,
the having sat through it.
We need like a 6-month-long moratorium on movies over like an hour and a half. Just for a while, so everyone can dry out for a little bit, have a little exercise in brevity, and then we could go back and slowly introduce, like, go 15 minutes more and 15 minutes more.
Yeah. No, the correct answer to any movie when someone tells you about it and they say, "What is it about?" You say, "It's about 90 minutes." That's the right answer to that question.
All right, I can do that.
Yes,
I can do that. Let's see here. Okay. So another genre of failure and fraud, the cynical Bible salesman, which covers a lot. That sounds very specific, but there's a ton of them. You've got like, Paper Moon and There Will Be Blood, and John Goodman and Oh Brother Art Thou, which is a whole bunch of different frauds.
Oh, that's right. He's frauds.
Amazing, very short performance. But the one I pick is Night of the Hunter. Because I am still scared of Robert Mitchum to this day.
Is he a loser though? Is he is he a failure? I guess he's.
Well, he escaped to jail. Like he was down on his luck, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, but these are things one can be and still be a raving success, Joe.
I don't know if you could really say he made it at any point. Like, he never really, and the main thing is like, from the beginning, he was already like down on his luck, which is my thing. But he's also like one of the scariest, most psychotic, like, just villains in like movie history. And I think I had a boyfriend have me watch it, and I was like, all right, fine. And I was like, oh my God. And then like it's like an American German expressionist movie, like the sets and the geometry and the shadows and everything is so menacing. And like, the love-hate monologue thing is like repeated to death. And as it's been referenced in other movies, obviously, but like, it is so good.
Yeah.
And like when you see it, it's like very stirring. But when like I still like have this thing of like, when he's going down into the basement, he's doing I can feel myself getting awful mad now. I'm like, oh my God, this is this most terrifying man on earth. And then, yeah, I love a big stylized soundstage in black and white where they do weird shadow projections and like, it's cool. It's like German expressionist American Gothic.
Why? I'm sure I know this, Joe, and I'm just playing. Why didn't Lawton direct again, Joe?
Because the picture was an unmitigated disaster.
Yeah.
It got terrible reviews. No one came to see it.
No one liked it.
And he was working on another movie. He was working on The Naked and the Dead. He was going to make that as his next picture. And he just was so demoralized that he just said, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, God, yeah, I guess I'd traumatically erase that. Yeah, imagine making that movie and having that response. You,
Yeah.
It was the
And
50s.
I think because it had this criticism of religion, I think religious groups also like basically
Yeah.
like scared people away from seeing it at the time.
yeah,
Which
for
is
your
so
first-
funny because you like if you're watching that as a religious person and you're like if see anything about like Robert Mitchum and you're like, well, that hits a little too close to home. Like,
Well, yeah, but the heroine of the movie is Lillian Gish, and she's very religious.
yeah, she's super religious.
So I
Yeah.
mean, it's a very moral movie.
Yeah. It's like literally biblical. Like they go into this whole Moses in the basket metaphor thing, and it's just great. And I watched it over and over again, and it still scares me. There's a lot of detective movies, obviously, that are like there's very few movies where you're like, oh, this is a movie where there's a private eye, but he's really successful. Usually they're down and out, and their job by its very nature is kind of a con. It involves lying to get into places, to figure things out. It is in some ways just sort of a hustle. So there's a lot of them.
I'm trying to think who is. There's got to be. Are there any?
A successful PI.
Yeah,
They're in television is the thing. They'll have successful PIs in TV shows. But in a movie, you want to see a detective rolling out of a Murphy bed and
Right.
knocking all.
But even on TV, I mean, who's the
empty
best?
bottles.
I'm sure we're all going to say this. Who's the greatest PI in TV? It's
Magnum.
what he lives in a guest
Got it
house.
in the title.
He lives in a guest. I was going to go with Rockford Files, Joe, but
How
I missed
is
before your time. But he lives in a trailer on the beach. I mean, I can't think of too many. Yeah, it's interesting.
how was Columbo's bank account doing?
Well, he only could afford one trench coat, so I don't
Right.
He's a cop. He's not a PI.
Right. But he was always doing investigations. That was the whole thing. Yeah, I don't know. It's great, but we don't like to see. I guess for some reason we want our detectives to be a little bit in the gutter, a little bit dirty.
Yeah. Why is that's interesting? I've never
because they're in the
Just
gutter
more
with,
likable.
with their prey,
But,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But obviously, I've talked about this with Josh before. My favorite there is The Long Goodbye, the Altman Long Goodbye.
But he doesn't scam anyone.
He lies a little bit. He lies to get into places.
That's okay.
Yeah. And you could argue that to some degree, an amount of private investigation is sort of a scam. But that's more of a whatever. But this was also like the first time I saw it's playing on some like Sunday movie thing. And I had never seen. I was at my grandparents', and I had never seen like a Robert Altman movie. And I was like, I can't fucking understand what anyone's saying. What is the like I didn't get the dialogue thing yet. And if that's the first time you hear that, I'm like, what is going on? What is with all this mumbling? Everyone's talking over each other. And it sort of takes you a minute to like get into the rhythm of it. And then with also like the voiceovers and like with Elliot Gould's voiceovers, then you watch it. It makes more and more sense as you get older. I remember the cinematographer we were trying to think of. It's Vilmos Zsigmond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yes.
Yeah. And it just it looks beautiful, and it's like I like cool looking movies, and he just looks cool. Like from the second he wakes up in the bed of the suit, and he's all like the shirt is all messed up, and it's just cool, and he is so cool. Like Elliot Gould, like more than the Bogart Marlowe. He's like my dog, by the way, is named Marlowe. And people are like, oh, after Philip Marlowe. I'm like, yeah, the Elliot Gould Philip Marlowe specifically. Yes. And I think there was like one adjusting to like the kind of like the Altman dialogue stuff, but two, I was like, oh, this is like a this is like a parody of the genre, a comment on the genre, which is not something I got at the time. The first time I saw it, it's just like, this is the coolest looking movie once I start to understand what these people are saying. And it's interesting to have him as a character that's like kind of embarrassed about being like this person out of time. Like he looks a little bit sheepish for being this kind of, secretly kind of, not secretly, but, noble like person. Like he feels like his values have like, have been swept away. And it's like, why is anyone this kind of person anymore? Why is there any, what's the point of nobility? You're just like living next to these naked chicks doing yoga. Like that time is past. And he feels like very anachronistic, and his values feel very anachronistic. But at the same time, he's all like 70s cool and groovy.
And he's completely unimpressed with everybody.
Yeah. And unimpressed with themselves. He's just like, I'm just gonna keep going. And the kind of, I don't know, it's not snide, but he's constantly smirking a little bit. Like, come on, this is ridiculous. Even when like, terrible things are happening. Like we were talking about the Mark Rydell scene where, Marty with the bottle.
Yeah. He says he hits his girlfriend with the bottle, and he says to Marlo, and her I love, and you I don't even like.
I don't even like. Yeah. And the thing is, they've done that scene in a million other movies since. I think this is the first time where you had this guy who's like, this is a beautiful thing I love. Watch me destroy it, show you how fucking crazy I am. And with all of those, every time I see that, you see it coming. This is the first time I like never saw it coming. And it's shocking. It's like truly shocking, like how like violent and severe it is, and how just like malicious and menacing this man is. And it's like one of the few times when like, when Barlow was like, Jesus Christ, because he's so unimpressed with everything. And this one moment he's like, this is horrifying. And it really like hits very hard.
It kind of breaks through his facade. And I remember, I don't know if I've told the story on the show, but years ago, I lived in this house with a bunch of people, and one of them was an older actor who somehow had some connection to Rydell, and Rydell was at some event, and he invited me to go with him, and he was like, but don't embarrass me, because he knew that, when I think Mark Rydell, I think Long Goodbye and the Cowboys. That's pretty much it. Like, the one with Henry Fonda and Katharine Hepburn, that's lovely. It's a wonderful film.
It's fun.
But and he goes, don't embarrass me. Don't talk about that stuff. He's a serious director. And I went off, and the first thing I did was ask him about Arnold Schwarzenegger. And we spent half the night talking about The Long Goodbye and the other half talking about the Cowboys. And he was great. He was great.
It's amazing. Like, who wouldn't be proud of that moment to like switch from being like, oh, look at this sleazy piece of shit, to, oh my God, this man is a violent psychopath. I'm terrified of him.
It's an amazing performance. It's
and also,
good.
like, I've said this before, like, both with like Marilyn Monroe, and you see this very early thing. When you see Arnold, you're like, God, that guy's a star. Like, he really is. He had real charisma.
But to be fair, he does take his clothes off in the movie, and you had never seen that body before.
Those bodies didn't exist then.
Yeah.
And I'm not even into those bodies. I am way more, by the way, Elliot Gould, very sexually formative for me. Way more into a 70s style body, which is, I think, built on like cigarettes and a lot of brown liquor.
Right.
Somehow still sort of fit.
Right.
But when you see his body, it's like startling.
Yeah.
Because they just didn't make them like that.
No,
it
was the first. It was the first. We never saw that body. Although actually, that's not entirely true. There was Bronson
in Pumping Iron. We saw it.
Yeah, we'd seen that. Yes. But I remember as a kid going out to see Chato's Land with Charles Bronson, where he plays an Indian, a Native American who kills a guy. Guy has it coming, and then the whole movie's a posse chasing him, and he picks them off one by one. And at the end of the movie, Bronson shows up on a horse, and he's just wearing a loincloth, and you're like, "Holy shit!"
This man is an action figure.
It's the proto Schwarzenegger kind of body.
Yeah,
but they were not the norm.
I think other than that, it was just like this. I mean, there's Pumping Iron, but it was like, this is like a weird, like Charles Atlas, like, is like a super subculture of muscularity. It wasn't just
they're
like,
mutants. Yeah,
they are mutants.
And here he is in a quote unquote real world, and now comedians have that body, which I find immensely disturbing.
I find it disturbing when I walk by one on the street. They're not. I guess it's also like when you see like a runway model in person, you're like, oh, you're like a beautiful praying mantis. Like they look so strange, but on the screen you kind of get it. But then if you see them in person, it's like startling. You're like, oh, you're not built like a normal person.
Yeah, I just know that like if Woody Allen were 35 today, he'd be buff, and that's just too creepy. I can't.
Would he?
Yeah, he would. He would.
Ugh.
They all are. It's just disturbing.
It wouldn't do anything for him.
Just disturbing. By the way, shout out to Jack Black. I think he's the last man standing, and I'm sure the next time you see him in something, he'll be buff. But
oh yeah, I knew it was getting bad when Jonah Hill got skinny. I was like, what are you doing, man? You were fine. That was your thing.
Yeah.
Who are we gonna? Who are we gonna?
I mean, he's healthy.
We have to have those bodies for movies. Where are we gonna get them?
it's true. He is probably healthier, but yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Probably, but I don't know. Was he really that big? He got like skinny.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know. It was
He got unrecognizable is what he did.
Yeah. Which you have to think is going to like hurt your career.
Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine the joy of that phone call, when your agents call you up and like, Jonah, you need to put it back on.
Yeah.
That's the best phone call you could get.
Call De Niro.
Yeah. Well, I think it was like Patton Oswalt talked about like being at some awards thing and he was like trying to lose weight to get into a suit or something. And he ran into like Brian Dennehy in like the buffet line. And he looks at him and he goes, he's like piling food on him. And like Brian Dennehy looks at Patton Oswalt and goes, character actors, am I right? And I was like, yes, that's the joy. That's the joy of it.
Yes, absolutely.
This is also one of the answers I give to when people ask me, oh, what would you do who would you want to play you if someone optioned your book? And I'm like, Brian Dennehy or I walk, but he's dead, but I can't. But I was like, it's either that, and then I switched it to, I forget who I switched it to. I have a few different dumb joke answers. But yeah, I always pick an older, heavier man. Well, anyway, the movie, I just love it. I love the satire of noir. I love in the California sunshine. I think like, Gould is just like dripping with like charisma. I love this like kind of like, he's like a cool, smirky, like, yeah, what are we doing here? Like, but he also has this nobility, and it just looks cool. The movie just looks cool. Everything looks cool in it.
Hey, I want to take advantage of this moment to pause for 1 second and tell you a couple things. First of all, Kino Lorber has just come out with a fantastic new Blu-ray, I believe it's 4K, of The Long Goodbye that looks phenomenal, is loaded with all kinds of stuff. And really the reason I'm telling you about it is because one of the things it's got is my Trailers from Hell commentary on the film, which is a movie I also love. And while I'm telling you about that, I can also tell you that you can get it like most of the films, if not all of them that we discussed today with Amber. You can get them at our sponsor, moviesunlimited.com, the movie collector's website, who are great fans of our show and great supporters and have so many of the movies that we talk about here. Obviously, a lot of the films we talk about, or at least some of them, are impossible to find anywhere. But if you can find it somewhere, you can almost certainly find it at moviesunlimited.com. And do I really have to go off about how amazing and important and essential hard media is? You get extras, you get bonus features, director's commentary, deleted scenes, all kinds of goodness. And hey, even sometimes you get Trailers from Hell commentaries. So buy your favorites at moviesunlimited.com. And their prices are great. Their choices are endless. You can own the titles you love and enjoy all the bonus features you just don't get anywhere else.
So click the Movies Unlimited banner on our website and buy your favorites from hard-to-find films, imports, and more. Go now to moviesunlimited.com, the movie collector's website where shipping is always free on orders over $50. So don't be afraid to spend a lot of money.
Hey, it's Otis Gray. Do you have trouble falling asleep? Well, you should check out this podcast called Sleepy. It's where I read old classics and help you fall asleep.
Best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom.
And that's it. So get tucked in, fluff up the cool side of your pillow, and take a one-way train down to Sleepy Town. Unless you're driving, then please don't listen to Sleepy. New episodes go out every Sunday, so you can get refreshed for your week. Subscribe to Sleepy wherever you get your podcasts. Sweet dreams.
Yeah. So yeah, but I said like there's a lot of just broadly general like Coen Brothers movie that have like failures and frauds. But I love the Coen Brothers specifically for turning their like the most famous and like sometimes like handsome leading men in Hollywood into absolute buffoons.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to think that must be a kind of like revenge thing. Like if you're gonna like, that must be super fun if you
I think
like
it's really
have, like,
fun
a
for
nerd
those guys
thing.
too. I think
Yeah.
my
Oh no, they love it. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, like like Brad Pitt does really well at it. I mean, like
Yeah.
it was very good at that stuff. But yeah, they do a lot of failures and frauds. They like people who fail. But in the back to the detective thing, I wanted to throw this in as like a weird one, but Who Framed Roger Rabbit? So I had it as a kid. For some reason, we had a VHS that was given to us by like a neighbor.
Mhm.
And I watched it obsessively, obviously as a kid for like the the novelty purposes, which is insane to look at now because it's like the copyright, how could we could never do anything that postmodern at this point because that's just like like Disney would have you killed. Like you would never be heard of. They would kill your family and your dog if you did that now. And especially to make a movie with like adult themes or whatever. But
That's
also,
the
like,
part that's yeah.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting. Although they did do what was God, there was that Spielberg movie that everybody spent 2 years just breathlessly anticipating and then it was gone in 5 minutes. Ready Player One.
Ready Player One. Yeah. It
Oh,
didn't
Yeah.
last long.
yeah.
Where they sort of made all those deals and then they all sort of it was it was just that was
It's
kind
an
of like
exhausting film.
Actually,
Yeah.
I didn't even really hate it as much as I thought I would. I think I hated like it's lazy to say you hate the hype, but at some point when a movie is just like mediocre and people have to have very strong opinions about it, I was like, this is just. I'm like, it's fine. It's fine. Can we stop talking about this movie? Parts of it look like shit. There's some decent like, I don't know, funny kind of old Spielberg, but like I'm like I won't remember this movie,
Yeah.
and it's a disposable movie.
yeah, there's just sort of moments where you pick out your favorite character from some other movie in the background. It doesn't
Right.
And I guess
Um,
because Roger Rabbit predates it predates CG. That was all weird.
It was.
That was like state of the art. I mean, Joe, you were
Yeah, no, I've made one of those, and it's I did mine a number of years after, and by then it was much easier to combine live action and animation. But the lengths that they had to go to for Roger Rabbit, it was really a remarkable achievement. I mean, I don't personally find the movie very funny because I don't think Roger Rabbit is very funny.
Oh, he's not.
But it's fascinating. I auditioned for the voice of Roger Rabbit, as a matter of fact.
What?
Yeah.
Wait,
I
what?
can't imagine why.
What?
but I
What?
did. Bob
I mean,
Zemeckis
why
asked me to audition
Wow.
for the voice, so I did.
Wow.
But in the end, it's an amazing achievement that didn't really seem to have much of a point to me.
See, I think I liked it initially for like the novelty, but when I go back, I'm like, actually, this is kind of a really interesting movie about like the death of cities and public transportation
Yeah.
in Los
yeah,
Angeles.
Yeah.
And like I love like, Bob Hoskins is
Uh,
he was a treasure.
yeah. He's absolutely
Also
amazing.
fellow traveler, very big labor voter guy.
That's right.
But
if you I'm always like if people come to LA and they want to know about its history, it's like you watch Chinatown, watch Roger Rabbit, and that's pretty much all you need to know about Los Angeles history.
this crazy freeway idea. We got
Yeah.
the best public transportation in the world. Yeah. And it's I mean, I think it could have leaned more on the novelty. And I think I appreciated it more when I was like, I love this like as a kid, and I like that the story is really interesting. And I agree with you. The cartoons are not the funny part. It's more the lines from, Eddie Valiant, Dolores, and like these, sort of like, dumb blue kind of comedy lines.
The book is actually pretty good.
That's right. Yeah, who censored?
Who
Roger
censored
Rabbit.
Roger Rabbit? is the
Yeah.
name of
Oh,
the
I
book.
didn't know that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
worth reading. It's really
It's
quite
pretty
interesting.
fun. It's very
But
different.
but I appreciated it more because I was like, there was a period when people were sort of trying to do like, more stylized, because I think the Dick Tracy movie came out afterwards, and me and my friend Matt were like, let's rewatch that, and we're like, God, this is terrible.
Oh no,
like-
I don't want to hear that. I've been sitting on it I've been thinking about going back to it for months. I want to give it
It
another shot.
Looks bad.
Oh,
Like it looks bad. I'm like, I made that set for a high school play. And like it's all like the primary colors and stuff, and it's like actually they had all these cartoons and stuff in Roger Rabbit, but they did like a good job with like there's garbage in the streets,
Yeah.
there's dust on the thing, it looks like a movie,
yeah.
and they didn't have to do that. And I think God, when you figure out how much they spent on Dick Tracy, and the prosthetics are awful. It came out after Hoffa too, so there was no excuse. They figured out how to make good prosthetics.
Right.
So it's like this literally only makes me appreciate like the technical achievement of Who Framed Roger Rabbit more. And then also,
thankfully, this is a good episode because we've just ensured that neither Spielberg nor Warren Beatty will come on the show now. So it's
The guests' opinions are entirely their own.
Yeah, I
do not represent the sponsor or the show.
But it was oh wait, there's one other thing I was going to say about. Oh yeah, I also like any movie where I'm still scared of the bad guy, where I still shiver. And I when I was a little kid, when they would drop the shoe into the dip, the little anthropomorphized shoe into the dip, I would take the cushions off the couch and hide under them during that scene.
That's awful. That's an awful scene. Yeah.
It's really intense.
Screaming for his life. Like, don't kill me. Don't kill me.
Please don't kill me.
Drop him in a vat of acid.
Intense for like a little kid to like see. And I love that movie, but I literally, as like a 4-year-old, would hide under the cushions to watch it. Yeah, Christopher Lloyd's great. He's terrifying.
Yep.
So there's like also like just sort of a broader like get rich quick kind of thing, which tends to include like a lot of gambling movies. I actually like it's a cliche millennial thing, New York transplant to LA thing to say like I was blown away by Uncut Gems, but I was. I also I went to go see it with my friend Cal at Metrograph, which is a theater I miss going to very much. And there's always a lot of like disparate kind of previews that come before, and the first scene of that is, and Cal's Ethiopian, by the way. So we see like this Ethiopian like opal mine, and he's like, oh my God, there's a movie about Ethiopians. It's like I'd like to watch this, and then it like goes into the movie, and we're like, oh shit, and like we were very excited to like actually be surprised by the beginning of a movie for once. And then it had been so long since I had like seen something that actually made me anxious. Like the actual tension of it didn't feel like really fabricated. At one point, I can't remember if it was me or him, but one of us turned to the other one and just whispered, if someone doesn't kill him soon, my heart is going to explode. Like we just spent the whole movie clenched. I think it gave me like back pain. And like at the end, we were just so relieved when he died, because we were just like, first of all, it was a very humane death for him, because his final thoughts were, I won.
Right.
Because he was so into it. Like he was so involved. I mean, I thought it was like a really good depiction of someone who was like a compulsive, like a gambler, like an addict more broadly. Because if you've ever like been around someone who has a problem like that and are really enjoying themselves while they're destroying themselves, it's so frustrating, because you're like, you have to stop. you are falling apart, but they're enjoying it and they cannot hear you. Like it's much easier when they're down and out, but when they're like, on the high of it, it's just like not listening. And that's how he's just like, that's the really frustrating thing too, because at any point he could have told Judd Hirsch, I'm in trouble, please help me out, I'm in over my head, but he couldn't do it. Right. It was just like a part of this compulsion. So it was so frustrating.
There's something, it's just a small bit in that film, but I loved it so much because it just has that, I don't know, I love this sort of cameo when, was his girlfriend, is it his girlfriend's apartment down, her neighbor is John Amos. And he's got about 3 lines and 2 quick scenes, but it's John Amos, as he's not playing somebody, he's John Amos, the guy from that show. And
I didn't even like,
and I love stuff like that. I love those little touches of, because sometimes John Amos lives down the hall from you in New York.
Sure. And then it was really well cast. I liked the like weird non-traditional casting where they just had all these weird New York people. I think they were used very well. I think that can be really, like that could be done very like poorly and be kind of cheap, but I think they did really well with it. And yeah, it has a really amazing, like menacing kind of intense rage from Bogosian, the Armenian Elliot Gould, if you will. And it was just great. It was like it literally like gave me back pain watching it because I was just so clenched, and I was like, please kill him. It's the only way he can end it. Like, and I don't want him to come down from the high. I want him to, if you're like putting down an animal, you feed them all their favorite treats first, so they think they're just having the best day of their life. And he's so excited. He's like, I won, and it's like he's so far gone. He doesn't see anything but the bat. But along that line, it's not my favorite like gambler movie. Mine is California Split.
Oh,
another
mumbling Altman movie.
Another mumbling Altman, which I watched much later because I was like, oh, that's his thing. Like years later, I'm like, his thing is just like mumbling. But by then, I kind of figured it out. Got it.
It's not just mumbling. I mean, does multi tracks of everything, and then the mixes are really complicated because there's so many different things that have been captured.
Well, especially in like one of these like gambling halls, which are not like some of them aren't technically casinos. They're like this weird institutions that exist like just outside of California, and they're just like super busy.
It's like poker.
Yeah. And like that world is just, but I also like that it's like a buddy comedy too. And they have like really, really great chemistry, and you're following it. And it's like very frustrating because you realize there is something like super natural about, I mean, it is kind of, it's a little bit like of a supernatural movie, like the way all these women are, like all these women have the same name. And I guess it was like, it was a reference. They're all these Barbaras that occur throughout, but you realize like, oh, there is some kind of blessing or gift that Elliot Gould has for gambling that you just really start to believe that he's like touched. And it's very like, it's really frustrating because like, George Steele's got this shitty life. He's always trying to get out of the office. And like, by the way, his life is not that shitty. He's like writes for it, but like he feels stuck. He feels like he's in a rut. They have this like great adventure, and then like you're kind of heartbroken because he does the mature thing and walks away. But I don't know. It's very cool. I like cool movies, and I think Altman sort of mastered cool. But it's like it's got all this texture with the, like the mixes and the sound, and you're just, it's like heartbreaking. I really wanted them to be friends and be friends, irresponsible forever. But obviously, like he doesn't have like this supernatural gambling gift that Elliot Gould seems to have, who is playing a much more chipper character than he does in Miller Altman, which he does very well. And it looks great. The whole thing looks great. The cars are great. The fashion's great. The fucking shots of the open road are great. The shots of the casinos are great. Shots of the track are great. Do you know how hard it is to tracks look like shit. It is hard to make them look good. It's a crowd and there's no space and there's no light. There's like, have you ever been to like Churchill Downs? Like everything, you just look like you're in a parking garage. But everything looks very cool.
What's the deal? Isn't there like a new cut of it, or the right cut finally came out?
There's varying cuts floating around of there were some changes made for music rights, which is the bane of
that's the big one.
Older movies. You know, well, you can't use that song. You know, even though people refer to songs that have been cut from the movie, and then in order to restore them, which can be done, you have to pony up the rights for the music that's now gone out of copyright or whatever, and
so much money.
It's very difficult to. I think the new iteration of it is the new Blu-ray is supposed to be complete, but I don't remember.
Yeah,
there was a new one at least maybe 6 months ago that was available for something.
Yeah, I think that's the right.
Looks great, sounds great. I can't remember. Although my like whole like the only like major cuts like difference for me was I and like Josh hates me for this, but like the first time I saw The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, it was the like 80 fucking year long director's cut, which is just like more shots of men grimacing in the sun. And I was like, Jesus Christ. And then I saw like, you know, the shorter version. I'm like, okay, I can digest this. Like, I don't like the director's cut. I think it's too much grimacing in the sun. I get it. And Josh
I don't think it's actually a director's cut.
Oh, really?
No, I don't think. I think it's a pre-release cut.
Okay. Well, then I feel
think
better.
they just with movies like that, they want to go back and find everything, you know. And then when they find it, they want to put it back in. And if it's a movie that's dubbed and was shot in a different language, then they have to get some of the people who are still alive to come back and do the voices over again. And it gets to be a big deal. But you know, the movie was 161 minutes or something when it came out initially.
Yeah, the short version.
And that was the short version. That was not the Italian version. But now I think it's much longer than it ever was supposed to be.
Too long.
I like them both. I mean, the revelation was that, you know, in the new version, it's so clearly Tuco's movie, which is not, you know, the focus is not as clearly just on him in the version we have all seen. But yeah, there's a weird moment where I guess they had lost the soundtrack. And so it's, you know, the 60-year-old Clint Eastwood and 85-year-old Eli Wallach having to dub themselves. And Clint still sounds pretty much like Clint. He's like, yes.
Yeah, he was born sounding like that.
Eli Wallach's voice has, you know, he really sounds like an old man in that one scene.
Well, I guess they had to find somebody to imitate Van Cleef.
I don't think he's in the scene.
No.
Yeah, but they also do that in Spartacus. I love where it's what is it? Anthony Hopkins dubbing Laurence Olivier, and he sounds just like Laurence Olivier. And then Tony Curtis dubbing Tony Curtis, but he's no longer 22-year-old Tony Curtis.
Yeah,
he's now old man. Yeah, I like oysters.
No, I remember seeing that and being like, "What's going on?"
Yeah,
like,
why does he sound like?
Someone had to like tell me. They're like, "I think you read that later." I'm like, "Has he been eating cigarettes for 20 years?"
It's hard to restore these movies. I mean,
it is.
Particularly when the people aren't around anymore. They've changed so much that their voices.
That's what I'm saying. I think it's better when you use someone else. Like I say, it's like Olivier. You know,
sure, just throw
Hopkins
someone in there.
Just like
put
Olivier.
Rich Little in there and do everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the big sort of failure fraud thing is when someone runs their scam under the moral alibi of someone else. This sounds sort of okay. So you mentioned the Wizard of Oz earlier. Like, there's a moral alibi to the wizard. Like, he's like, I'm just a very bad wizard. Like, I'm sorry, but he does try to help. But he's running a scam. Like Josh also hates me for this. But like, as a pure Harold Ramis apologist, I think Ghostbusters is one of the better. I also watched it pathologically as a kid, and I still I mean, I probably like Stripes or something better, even though that movie is like 5 different movies that fell apart.
Groundhog Day is better than both of them.
Yes.
Groundhog Day is 3 movies at least, and none of them ever fit. I mean, he admits that too, but yeah, no, it's brilliant. But I love Ramis, but in that you've got you've got Bill Murray, who is just a hustler, but then he has like these 2 true believers of the supernatural, so he can sort of like justify his scam of like paranormal studies, which, by the way, does exist at some universities. At some public universities, yes, there is some taxpayer money going to that, and it's good. But I think the big one is like Network, where they're you do have this one madman who is like really believes that God is speaking to him, and he's here to lead the people, and he becomes this cult leader. But then he becomes surrounded by all of these I'm blanking on the Selig or Svengali types that are like scamming around him. So they're using his earnestness to run this, and of course you've got like evil, gorgeous, just stunning Faye Dunaway, just like cold, ruthless bitch that falls from this can't ever be happy. And if you really want to be like coy about it, it's like you could say that Network is also a Showbiz scam movie. And there's all sorts of like little touches there, like the Black Panther lady. Everyone's just trying to get theirs in. Like everyone's just trying to get theirs in. There's something earnest at the core of it, but then you've got all these little strivers that are trying to sort of make a genuine kind of like popular phenomenon, as insane as it is, into something like into showbiz and to something marketable. And it's like also one of those things where you're like, God damn, they had no idea how right they were about to be. Like they weren't even like, it's not prescient. It vastly underestimates the extreme degree of kind of like media, like carnivalesque media productions that were bound to develop. I mean, they didn't even have like cable news, 24-hour cable news at that point.
I rewatched it recently, and it's just astonishing that there's nothing in that movie, with the possible exception of spoiler alert, shooting Peter Finch at the end, that isn't already dated. It's like they're so far past all of that now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing that is timeless is really just like the cynicism of the characters.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh yeah, we still have those really cold-blooded people that will just literally make money off of desperate people following a man's literal nervous breakdown. And
I think one of the most shocking scenes I've ever seen in a movie is just a bunch of people sitting in a room and calmly discussing the fact that they're going to kill him.
Yeah.
As if they were talking about the stock market.
Yeah, and then
every time I see it, it all throws me, because you're waiting for the beat where someone's going to go, you're kidding, and it's just they're just
nope. It's an option.
It's on the docket. It's item number 3 in the meeting. It's in the notes. Yeah. And it's just super. It's it's cold, and like it's just it really like makes you hate everyone. It's so contemptible.
And it has Ned Beatty's speech, which is
a
summation of the entire last 20 years.
Yeah, which I actually quoted that for an article I wrote for Columbia Journalism Review about why I read the Financial Times and not the New York Times. Is because the New York Times is sort of it's a paper of like ideology and liberal values and things like that. And they believe at their core on some level, or at least a lot of people in the editorial board believe that the world is a battle between ideas and ideologies. And, it's the liberal democracy versus blah, 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 blah. And FT, they're maybe not like on my side politically, but they know it's all about the bottom line. And you just get better news coverage from them because they're like, will this affect the stock market? will this affect international trade? So I read the capitalist paper, and I'm a little bit ahead of the game on the people who like consistently read the Times, because there's
Don't
just,
pretend to care about anything.
yeah, they also just know that like what people want and what people believe and what the popular will of people is largely secondary to whoever's holding the purse strings and what their interests are. So, it's good to read the bad guy paper sometimes, because they're, especially when the bad guy's winning, because they're clearly onto something.
Well, you want to know what they're up to too.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Friends close, enemies closer, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And my final one, I think this is just to annoy Josh. Fritz the Cat. It's also the only actual movie poster I own.
Great poster.
It's a great poster. I actually own the one from Spain, which is very like interesting because it couldn't be released in Spain until after Franco's death for a number of reasons. One, the whole fascism thing doesn't really allow for a counterculture. And two, it's a very Jewish movie. Franco was not that hot on the Hebrews. But so it came late to Spain after like there wasn't really a counterculture. And by the way, the translated title is into Spanish is El Gato Caliente, which just means horny cat. Which is, I mean, it gets to the point. But I just look at that and it's such like an American artifact. It's such a product of its time. I'm like, what must you have thought after living under weird conservative Catholic, like light fascist, Southern European piece of shit, like have thought watching an orgy scene in like a West Village, like with a bunch of animals in a bathtub. Yeah. But I also just think it's really beautiful. I love the animation. I love Bakshi. I've always said like everything he's done has been of some value. I said that everyone should watch Cool World on mute at least once. But this is like the most, everything is very textured. Everything is very muddy and dirty. It's, I think, a really good, I mean, one of the reasons I think R. Crumb like sort of distanced himself. He basically said, well, I never gave permission. He totally lied. He didn't like the way it turned out. And he didn't like that it criticized the counterculture. But I thought it was a very decent like criticism of the counterculture, and that like a lot of this stuff has gone very rotten and has become something very dark. And you just have this like dumb kid who he's not even trying to like hustle for money. He wants like notoriety, he wants to find himself and pussy, like no pun intended. Like that's why he's dishonest, is that he's sort of trying to get some sort of like credibility or meaning out of life, which is like such a, I mean, it's a little bit of a departure, but I still think it fits. He's a fraudulent horny cat. But it's just like, it's beautiful animation. I love that part of it is just literally documentary. He just did field recordings and then animated over it. One of my favorite scenes is just the one where there's all these rabbis talking, who Bakshi animates as dogs, and they look very menacing, which is really strange. And I'm like, why do they look so menacing? So one of those rabbis actually, I mean, they are all rabbis. He was recording a conversation between rabbis. One of them is his uncle. And you have to think like, okay, well, he animated them to look like mean fucking dogs. This is just daddy issues all over this, like all over the animation. It's amazing. You see, it's like really personal. I love hearing all the recorded conversations. I think like the weird interstitials where there's just the crow dancing to Bo Diddley, and it's like this very slow zoom in. It's beautiful. It's weird. I have no idea how it got made. It's like, it's almost impossible, I think, for anyone who hasn't read a decent amount about 60s counterculture to like really get into. But if you're a big like Thompson fan, it's like, oh wow, this also gets to the heart of what went very dark about like the 60s.
How did it get? It's
animation.
It's
a very small company.
Yeah.
Jerry Gross, he released pictures with titles like "I Drink Your Blood."
Yeah,
a great title. Not as good as Horny Cat, but
Well, the double feature was I Drink Your Blood and I Eat Your Skin.
Eat your skin. Yes.
there we go.
Yeah.
You got to give him the 1-2 punch.
Did he do The Rats Are Coming and The Werewolves Are Here?
No, but he
Or
did
that-
do Sweet Sweetback's Badass.
That's right.
Okay, I've seen
And
that.
it was sort of an underground independent movement that was also exploitation, but it was really cutting edge because it was all the stuff was rated X.
Yeah, this was the first, it was the first rated X cartoon, which is just like watching it and you're like, how do you even do that? Like, it's not, I mean, it's also like not, I mean, it's a dirty little cartoon.
Yeah.
And they're clearly having fun with like the, you know, the Arcrum kind of like lascivious thing, but it's like, and now that's like the kiss of death, but it was used to market it at the time. They're like, it's a rated X cartoon. And people are like, well, I got to go see this really weird, covert criticism of the counterculture.
Yeah, no, I remember as a kid, I was fascinated by it because I think I'd stumbled across, my dad had a bunch of Zap comics that I had found at an early age. And I was quite fascinated because all the comic books I knew were just, you know, Batman and stuff. And then to find out that there was a movie of this insanity that, you know, none of my friends even knew existed, having to see it. And I think it didn't for many, many years, but it's an interesting film. When I think of it, I always think of the way he used photographic backgrounds in some of the scenes, and you'd have animated characters, but they weren't, you know, they weren't amazing, beautiful locations. They were just like grimy, filthy New York alleys.
We loved their everything too, with like the like any of the night scenes with the urban scenes, or even like the, you know, on the road stuff. It just looks like he smeared like dirt over everything. But there's still all this texture. There's still like 50 different colors to make that blue, to make that like bleak blue. And honestly, it's a great cartoon, man. Like, it's a good cartoon.
It's been a long time. Long time. I always want to like Bakshi more than I do. We haven't talked about it, but Joe, are you a fan? No.
Well, we've also talked about how like my favorite movie makers all fall flat on their face, and even my favorite movies by them all contain at least a few like, why is that in there? That's stupid. Because that's kind of, I think you kind of get credit for effort, like, or at least dynamism. And maybe it doesn't get executed well, but I appreciate that you did something fucking weird. And they're not all going to work.
I loved his Mighty Mouse. I loved that there was a time when they would let Ralph Bakshi do a Saturday morning cartoon. And he needs constraints though. Like when they're like, oh, just do whatever you want. And he made Cool World. And it's like, Jesus, you need someone to rein you in, buddy. You need some source material and stuff. Well, Amber, thank you, man. That's it's been delightful spending time with all these losers.
I like losers. I like losers and liars and hustlers and conmen, and they're the funnest movies to me.
There's a lot of great ones. Well, thanks so much for taking us through some of your favorites, man. This was a blast, and
we got the equipment working and everything.
Yes. I'm glad you finally have Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is a good thing to have in 2021.
Yeah, so is a car, which I had to buy today as well. So for a while, like, there was no overlap. There was almost a period where I didn't have Wi-Fi or a car in Los Angeles.
Wow.
Which is just drop me off naked in the woods with a knife. I'd be more prepared. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye.
Bye, kiddo.
We're the official podcast of trailersfromhell.com, the best damn movie website there is. Our engineer is the composer Don Barrett, who also transmogrified, produced, and created our theme song. This is Josh Olson for the Movies That Made Me.